So thank you, everyone. So this is Carlos again. This is the first roundtable we are hosting with an incredible table of experts for the Evolve Club. So thank you all for joining us. I'd also like to extend a special thanks to our sponsor, Hermit, for making this event possible. Their support helps us create valuable discussions and connections. So first off, I will talk about the event structure today. We'll speak about Brian's career and journey, and I will lead this block, followed by Flavio Diaz, who's going to be talking about global retail today. Then Adam Nielsen will be talking with Brian about technology and digital leadership in commerce, followed by Hugo Betlin, who's going to be talking about leadership and corporate responsibility. And then finally, we'll have Olivia Mark talking about future-proofing commerce strategies. Each block will involve a brief introduction by one expert, followed by Brian's perspectives. So first off, I will do a few introductions here from the panelists. So first, Brian McBride. He's the Trainline PLC chairman and former chairman of ASOS, ex-CEO of Amazon UK. So Brian is currently the chairman at Trainline PLC, likely one of the UK's and Europe's largest leading digital ticket seller of train tickets. He's the lead non-executive director of board of the UK's Ministry of Defence, a UK government appointment, and he's also a senior advisor with Scottish Equity Partners. Olivia Mark, she's a retail tech investor and operator. Olivia Mark is a retail tech investor who focuses on scaling innovative companies in the commerce space and technology sectors. She brings years of experience identifying high growth opportunities and supporting startups in achieving market success. Flavio Diaz is an investor and board member. Flavio Diaz is an investor and board member with over 20 years of leadership experience, including former president of Walmart.com in Brazil. He's also recognized as expert in digital transformation and e-commerce. Then Adam Nielsen, CTO and co-founder of Novicel. Adam Nielsen is Novicel's CTO. He has over 25 years of experience in digital strategy and technology solutions. He's also an investor and advisor who helps businesses scale through innovation and tech integration. Adam is based in Denmark. Hugo, president of Conscious Capitalism Brazil. Hugo Betlin is the president of Conscious Capitalism Brazil and the seasoned leader with over 30 years of experience in retail and corporate governance. He is also an investor and advisor focused on sustainable business practices and social impact. All right. So we'll start. Brian, let's start with the same question that I always ask, which is the big picture. We'll speak about your career and how did we get here. And if you like to share some slides, I think this is the moment. So Gustavo can help us. Yeah, so tell us all about it.
Great, sure. Yeah, Gustavo, if you can stick up, there's a slide there that talks about companies that I work for. Look, I've been very lucky to have worked for some great companies. It was never a master plan. I think with many people, it's really just a step at a time. I studied at the University of Glasgow, where I was brought up as one of 8 kids. I lived in a working class house, working class upbringing. My dad was a teacher, my mum was a nurse. So it was a very ordinary life for me. It was I was well looked after, and my parents were good enough to helped me get to university. Studied liberal arts there, did politics, economic history as well. First job was selling photocopiers. I used to sell photocopiers for a company called Xerox. It was great stuff. They gave me a decent salary, a car, and for your first job out of university, it gave me great standards. After 3 or 4 years of that, I'd kind of done it, and so I moved on to IBM. In those days, this was back in about 1980, 81, so it was 40 years ago. IBM is dominant in mainframes, big mainframe company. And I spent about 10 years there. I moved from Glasgow to Manchester to London to New York. I worked at headquarters in upstate New York, and then I did a global role just as an operating system called Unix was becoming popular. Had a great time at IBM. It taught me a huge amount of standards. It taught me about leadership. It taught me about how to develop people. And it was just a great part of my life. When I left IBM, I then went to work for a small company in the digital printing space, a company called Crossfield, owned by Fujifilm and DuPont. And it was going through, there was a big tech transition happening at this time. This was about the early mid 90s, so 93, 92, 93. And at that time, what we were seeing was that, the Apple Mac had come along, Sun Microsystems, Adobe, Quark Express, and the old proprietary page makeup systems, which my company sold for about $500,000 a time, were being supplanted by a set of desktop hardware and software that cost a tenth of that. Quality was probably not as good, but it was good enough for most people. And that caused a revolution. That was the only time when I was in the wrong end of a technology transition. A great learning. It was the hardest job I ever did, the toughest job I ever did. I was closing down factories. I was letting go 50% of the employees. I think you've got to do this horrible stuff once in your life just to appreciate the good stuff. Then when I moved on from big tech, I moved into smaller tech. I then joined the networking industry, and I joined a company called Madge Networks. It was in the field of token ring adapters. When the internet came along, the original PC IBM never talked to anything. It was a standalone device. And then they created local area networks, and they were Ethernet and token rings. So I was in at that time. And then the internet came along, we're into wide area networks, the technologies took off. So I was living in a world where, Cisco and people like that were the networking kings. I then moved into Dell, worked on PCs, worked on servers and really large corporate sales. I loved it again, loved working for Michael Dell. I really like entrepreneurs. I've never had the courage to be one. I've never bet the farm, but I love being around, risk takers like entrepreneurs. Did about 4 years there, and then I moved into, and this was all serendipitous. It was all no master plan. But in 2003, I got a call from Deutsche Telekom to come and join what was T-Mobile in the UK, which is now called EE over here. And that was when it was 2.5G. 3G was just coming along. Nobody really wanted to use the phone for internet. Think about trying to type in a 10-digit credit card and a security code, on an old-fashioned keyboard. It just wasn't done. But this was the heyday because 3G came along, Nokia was the king there, and then mobile data really started to take off. It was a very, very exciting time in industry indeed. And then from there, I ended up in Amazon. Again, just by luck, they gave me a call. I never thought I was a retailer, never thought I knew anything about e-commerce. I joined Amazon back in 2006 when we were seeing the transition really from catalogs to online shopping. Amazon was a pioneer there, but even in those days in the UK, it was a relatively small business. I think in my 6 years there, we saw it growing from about $3 billion to $5 billion, but a very, very exciting time. I was hired by Jeff Bezos. I was probably the oldest guy in the company, certainly the oldest member of his leadership team. And I think they didn't bring me in to do some cool web design or anything like that. They brought me in just to build a leadership team because the UK was quite flaky at that time in terms of people. I had a terrific ride. Jeff himself interviewed me, saw a lot of him, and he was a very influential person in my career. At the end of my time at Amazon, I developed prostate cancer, and I was very lucky. I caught it early, got it fixed, but I thought, time to do something different. I was in my mid-50s then, and I decided to embark on a plural career. So off I went, and I was very lucky. I got the job at ASOS as chair there, the fashion company, quite early. I'd known ASOS because when I was at Amazon, we tried to buy ASOS at one point. ASOS were smart enough not to accept our offer, and the company's market cap ended up being 5 times what it was when we were offering to buy them. I then joined the board of a number of other companies, a UK company in fintech called Monetize. I helped take public a UK online appliance business called AO. I served on the advisory board of Huawei, the Chinese networking and tech company. I was on the board of the BBC, which was an interesting organization. And then I ended up in places like Kinnevik, the great Swedish asset management, investment management, private equity company, where we had major shares in businesses like Zalando, the German fashion business, Babylon, the health tech company, which eventually crashed and burned, and Tele2, the big Swedish phone company. Along the way, I picked up a role at Aberdeen, which is a large asset management company with about 600 billion under management. I then joined Lazard and the investment manager as an advisor. And I ended up, my most recent gig is chairing Trainline, which is a UK PLC. It's got a market cap of about $3 billion. And we basically sell digital tickets across Europe. So look, that's my kind of career. I've been pretty lucky. When I think about luck, I do think about Seneca. Seneca, the great Stoic philosopher who was around in the time of Nero, just as we were going in the clocks from BC to AD. Seneca came out with a comment which has been paraphrased by many other people, but luck is where preparation meets opportunity. I think you need a bit of luck, but you need to be ready for it, and you need to recognize it when it comes along. And maybe if I just finish with a couple of observations that kind of positions why I think industry is what it is, digital is what it is, retail is what it is. I've lived through Moore's Law. Gordon Moore, the vice president of Intel, back in 1969, observed that the power of the microprocessor was doubling every 12 to 18 months. That was what led to this phenomenal explosion in tech where the mainframe went down to the size of the smartphone in your pocket. When I was at IBM and I was selling mainframes and storage devices, I used to sell a storage device which had 500 megabytes, half a gigabit of capacity for $100,000. And I just checked on Amazon this morning. You can buy a little zip drive, 1,000 times that capacity, 500 gigabytes of storage, and that will cost you $20. So that's what Moore's Law has done. It's made everything faster, cheaper, better, easier to use. And combined with Moore's Law, there's a guy called Charles Darwin. You may remember him because we talk about his theory, and he wrote a book called The Origin of the Species, from which his theory of evolution was derived. It's a pretty dry, boring book. It came out in 1859, and I can probably save you a long read by crystallizing what he said in 2 or 3 sentences. And Darwin's point is that it's not the fastest of the species that survives, it's not the most intelligent, it's the most adaptable. It's those who've observed what's going on around them and changed because of that. And if you look back at industry, look at all of the companies out there that have gone by the wayside. You've seen Netscape, Compaq, Kodak, Motorola, probably the greatest example, Nokia, which controlled the mobile phone industry, never saw the future coming and completely lost it. So that's kind of where we are today. I think this is an exciting time full of opportunity and full of threats. There's a clear long-term trend of declining corporate longevity. Public companies, the lifespan of a company in the Standard & Poor's Index in America is currently 15 years. It was 21 years 5 years ago. And in 1965, it was 32 years. So basically, companies are living less. They're lasting for a shorter period of time. And in the next decade, 40% of the Fortune 500 companies will vanish. Make sure yours isn't one of those. And they'll vanish not because of a cataclysmic event, not because of a war or a pandemic, but because of a lack of technology, a lack of digitalization, and a lack of innovation. That was an observation made by a guy called Carlos Rivas, and I believe in it. So there's a health warning there for all of our companies. Let me stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you very much. Now, Flavio, since you've been working in retail for such a long time, now you're a board member, not only in retail companies, but tech companies that are making a big impact in Brazil, Latin America, worldwide. Perhaps you have some questions that you'd like to ask Brian.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Very nice to meet you, Brian, and thanks for all of the attendance. I've been working for retail for more than 25 years now. I've seen a bunch of stuff, and I think when talking about what is happening worldwide in retail, there's no better place than NRF. NRF is the National Retail Fair that takes place every year, every January in New York. And I've been attending those conferences for many years now. And I was just thinking about what the main topics I've been seeing there. And I remember for the first years I was there, there's always a discussion about the store efficiency, on-shelf availability, how to decrease lines, overall productivity, technology that will help us to improve the customer experience in the stores. Then after that, I remember a year that it was the year of the e-commerce boom, and the stores will disappear. So it's everything about the stores. The stores is going to go away. Everyone is going to buy online. Then the next year, there was already a change, and they were talking about the new role of the stores, right? The multi-channeling, the stores, serving to in a different role, different sizes, different formats. Then in the other year, they're talking about the omni-channel. So omni-channeling was the big word, and everything. Everyone was talking about it. More recently, for past few years, there was this hyper personalization talk. So everyone will bringing technology to get to know each and every one of the consumers, and delivering individual experiences through the different channels. Then this last year, the whole talk was amongst three things: content-driven commerce, retail media, and of course artificial intelligence. Right, that took like 90% of the talks, the stages were populated by artificial intelligence and its impact on retail. There's no special talk on these other things, but I think borderless commerce, it's a big thing. It's a big trend as well, a big challenge, and especially when it comes with competing with Chinese, right? And we are living it in Latin America, here in Brazil, with Shein, Shopee, AliExpress, and I'm pretty sure that they are very strong, becoming stronger in each and every country of yours as well. So you can look at this at these things as challenges, but I following the culture of Walmart, I used to think of those things as opportunities, like you were saying, Brian. You have to be ready for that. You have to take advantage. You have to jump ahead and make a differentiation of yourself in front of those challenges. I would love to hear your perspective on what is happening in this area of challenges and opportunities, and what would you highlight for this audience of the big trends, of the big opportunities that are taking place right now for the global retail?
Yeah, I think some great observations and points there, Carlos. Thank you. And I have with you observed that many of these trends they've come along over the past 10 years. And I was probably one of the more hawkish ones, just after COVID. I mean, we saw COVID, didn't we? Where COVID really accelerated the disruption that was going on. I think Satya Nadella of Microsoft said that we'd seen, 10 years of disruption in 3 months. And I think that was right. I think some of us were fooled into thinking that COVID was a complete reset of the world and the way that things were going to happen. Because if you recall, nobody could go out to stores were closed. And there was a massive move to online shopping, especially groceries and fashion. So I think we all drew the dots and joined the dots far too quickly there. And of course, there's been a reset, there's been a setback. But I do think that a number of the underlying trends are still there. And I think that if you look at, I've only got UK data, but I think last year, 38 retail stores closing every day in the UK. So if you take that, if that's an American proxy, you could say there'd be 300 closing every day. So I think we know that there are more stores closing down than opening up. But what does that mean? I think it comes back to my points about Darwin and Darwinism. I think the great retailers, and you look at people like Walmart that you've got experience of, the great retailers have adapted. They've seen what's going on. They've seen the threat, and they've really upped their game in terms of their ability to, first of all, let the customer buy when, where, and how they want to buy, because many people do want to go in store. Many people want a hybrid experience. They want to do the research online. But I do think that the big, great retailers have really upped their game and are a much more formidable competitor. What you've also seen happening, I think, is, again, it's a bit of Darwinism. You look at the fashion sector. You mentioned the Chinese, you mentioned Shein. I mean, in the UK, we had ASOS, we had Boohoo, we had lots of these great fashion retailers who we all thought they were going to live forever. Now, it's about 5 or 6 years since I've been at ASOS, but at one point they were growing and expanding globally, setting up fulfillment centers in the US, and suddenly they get completely undercut by somebody doing to them what they had done to other people. The Shane model of very fast fashion, very cheap fashion, visually well designed, and the ability to get stuff shipped globally in small packages quickly and cheaply is something that what I would call the traditional or the longest standing e-commerce players are finding it very, very hard to keep up with. And you're now getting some of the e-commerce players complaining about the ability of the Chinese to import small consignments and things. Well, it's interesting that they were the ones doing the disrupting 10 years ago, and now a lot of the e-commerce players are themselves being disrupted by the faster, nimbler players within the online community. So I think none of the trends that you talked about were wrong at the time, and I think things like omnichannel, very, very important. But I do think that the disruption is going to continue, and we all just have to get used to it. Understanding where tech is going. I think every single big tech trend and every single big tech transition, I think what tends to happen is that we overestimate the speed with which it's going to happen. We always think it will happen next month or next week. Everyone's talking about AI. AI is coming. It's not mainstream. Very few retailers are going to be able to create their own, large language models. But AI is definitely going to get here at some point. So we always assume it's going to get here more quickly. But what we also do is we underestimate the profound impact that it will have. And I think when these technologies do arrive, when they do get here, their impact on society and on business is even greater. So I think it's really important for not just retailers, but anyone in a consumer-facing business to make sure that they are understanding where these trends are going. If you look at, we've talked about retail today, but look at banking, look at healthcare, look at media and streaming, look at the travel market with OTAs and Airbnb, etc. Anyone who's got an individual customer has got to be aware of these trends. You've got to know where AI is going to play out in your business. And, it may not change the customer experience overnight, but very much in areas like customer service, in cybersecurity, in CRM, in content creation and production, there is no doubt that there is a big role for AI there. It's just not going to be here in the next 6 months, but that doesn't mean you should wait. I think people have to start playing, they have to start prototyping, they have to start learning about it. So the trends are still valid, the trends that you picked out, Flavio, I think they are taking longer to get here, but these are going to be very dangerous times, for as far ahead as we can see.
Thank you for that. Speaking of AI and speaking of tech, then I think this is a good segue to have Adam jumping in. Adam, perhaps you're a very digital guy and been implementing technology for the past 15 years. So yeah, go ahead.
And yes, there is a local large language model running on my MacBook Pro right now that I can talk to, but it sucks, to be honest. We need bigger machines to do that. And I think that's one of the most low things. One thing is for sure with technology is that AI is not only artificial intelligence, it's also allocate investment and do it fast and get some tests. I'm totally on board with that, Brian. But that also takes us into a little bit of another perspective, and I'll get to my question in a bit. But I see that the pace of change in technology in general, specifically in e-commerce, is just increasing, and it's doing so in different waves. Right now, we've seen a big one where we are moving more towards composable ecosystems because there are so many different customer journeys that we need to support. So we need to diverse our digital ecosystems. That's at least what we see in many organizations they are trying to achieve. Both get more specialist teams, but again, get them to collaborate a lot better and manage all of that change. And I think it happens in cycles. First, a big cycle of innovation, then making sure to scale that investment and then consolidate it and kill your darlings and then start over by innovating again, scaling your innovation initiatives that worked, not the ones that didn't, and then consolidate again. So what I think we've seen post-corona is a lot of consolidation, and now we are in the innovation wave part again, if you ask me anyhow. And what then is quite exciting to talk about, and what I would love to hear your opinion about, Brian, is if we take the notion you put up with preparation is key when you want to meet opportunities, but we also take one of my favorite quotes and laws, and that's Newton's third one, which is for every action there is an equal and opposite reaction. But once that's stated, I really want to have maybe not an opposite or an equal reaction. I want a bigger. I want something that's more innovative. I want the right reaction, and that means defining teams that are really good at actually driving execution of your initiative. So based on your vast experience, what is your recipe for designing a digital organization that deliver the most execution power in a phase of innovation or scale?
Well, that's a big question, Adam. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry.
No. And I get I'm lucky I get to see quite a lot of contrasts in my portfolio, because I was very lucky to have lived with really what I would call digital only businesses, like Amazon and ASOS and Trainline. These only were digital businesses. They never had to make the transition. I think the companies that have to make that transition, it's much tougher for them. If you think about a big retailer, think about a big bank or a big insurance company, you've got a whole bunch of systems there that are built on mainframes from 30 years ago. And it's like trying to change the engines in an aircraft when you're in midair. It's very hard to do. So it's hard to do technically, and yet you need modern, light, server-based, multi-system architectures, to be able to kind of move fast forward. But you also need culture and people and leadership models, as you say. And I witness it. I'm on the board of the UK's Ministry of Defence, and this is an organisation of 400,000 people. It spends $60 billion a year, second only to the US and the Russian Departments of Defense. I mean, it's a massive organization, but it is very old-fashioned. It's steeped in the past, and trying to get A, the tech, and B, the employees and the leadership to kind of move into that world is really hard. And do you hire great tech in and try and kind of transplant them and hope that they'll radiate? I haven't found the perfect model yet, but I do think that to really lead and drive tech innovation, tech reinvention, the ability to disrupt and to defend yourself from disruption, you do need practitioners who've been experienced, in that new world. And the challenge you get there is a people challenge, because if you're used to working for an Amazon or an ASOS or a Microsoft or Google or somebody, it's not a very attractive prospect to go and work at an old-fashioned bank or a retailer or a UK government department. So all of the smart techs are used to that fast-paced, quick cycle time life. Don't want to go to where the problems really are, which is moving these much more glacially paced companies. But I do think that every organization, you need to have some disruptors within it. You have to have, get together a smart team. If I think about Trainline, we're a smart company. We're 1,000 people, 800 of the people are tech, mainly London-based, but we're spread across Europe. And even us, we're learning about where we're going to go with AI and what it could mean to us. We've got 2 or 3 teams who've just been set up to go off, and it's almost like IBM researchers. We've just given them a budget, we've given them no time frame, no objective, just figure out what you can achieve with this. And of course, we're checking in on them, every month or so, but we're trying to take the pressure off deadlines and outputs. We're just trying to create an environment where people can try. I don't know what it's like in all of your countries, but in the UK, it's a very risk-averse culture. If you go bankrupt, you get a black mark on you, you find it hard to get credit. In America, if you haven't gone bankrupt, you haven't tried hard enough, so it's a very different business culture that we're trying to deal with here. So it's trying to create that culture where it's okay to fail, it's okay to try something, it's okay if it doesn't work, but at least just try it out. You know, I remember when I worked with Amazon, I was at a conference and they were talking. A guy from Cisco was talking about the sort of people that they hire, and he talked about, you know, it's a baseball metaphor, but he said, look, we like people who will hit 4 out of 5 rather than 3 out of 3. And I think that's the way to think about it. If you wait for perfection, you'll wait forever. So get people who try a few things. They might not work out, but if they don't work out, you haven't really lost anything. A bit of time and a bit of budget. So I think it's about the culture of the organization. I think it's about the people you've got in there, and it's about management giving people that greenhouse in which they can actually try things even if they don't come off. Easy to say, hard to do when you're under pressure for your cost base and your profitability is declining. But I do think that business leaders have to be more courageous. You know, when you think about that statistic I said about the decline in corporate longevity, if you want to be one of the ones that survive in the next 15 years, you've got to set up some projects today that won't yield anything for you in the next 5 years.
So different pace of innovation in different teams is the mix, and yeah, good answer, I think. Thank you, Brian.
Perfect. Thank you. Now we're going to move to Hugo, who's been working with, well, in retail as well for at least 30 years and is quite big on corporate responsibility. Hugo brought conscious capitalism to Brazil. So Hugo, perhaps you have a few questions in regards to that topic to Brian.
So good morning from Brazil for everyone. It's nice to see you again, Flavio. And Brian, Adam, and Olivia, it's a pleasure to meet you, to e-meet you. Once we are talking about digital, this is e-meeting. And Carlos, thank you very much. You know that the name that you chose, Carlos, to your new business or to your new, let's say, group of thinkers is evolve. And this is exactly what we need to do. We can't stay static. We need to evolve. As Brian said, I will not choose, I will not affirm, but I believe that Brian and myself, minimum, we are baby boomers. So being baby boomers, we are probably the most Darwinian generation that exists. And that's why we are here. But one of the most important things is that during my 45 years in the retail business, 35 as C-level in Carrefour, Casino, Jerônimo Martins, and big companies, also starting as a consultant in Arthur Andersen in the 70s, and now as a senior retailer advisor for retail business at Alvarez & Marsal, an American consultant company. What we see is about leadership, a very important lack of it. And one thing when we talk about 5 generations, never in the world we saw 5 generations working together. So this is a big challenge for the youngest and for the oldest. That's why we need to evolve and understand that Z generation, Alpha generation, they're not problems. They have their way of thinking. And we as baby boomer and Y, X generation, again, we are different and we need to work together. So the major responsibility of a leader, of a CEO, when people ask me, what is being a conscious leader? And I say, it's taking care of people. The business of business is people. Yesterday, today, always. So when someone says, no, my major concern is taking care of the customer, you're lying. You do not even know a customer. It's very rare that you go out and talk to a customer. Your job is taking care of the people that take care of the customer. And the same for suppliers, the same for your, especially for your employees and the society itself. So what we are seeing, I think everywhere in the world, in Brazil, we are facing this very strongly because we are a country that is becoming very old very fast. In comparison to Europe, we are becoming older 5 times faster than Europe became older. So when Brian said, when I joined Amazon in 2006, I probably was the oldest guy. Probably they really need your silver hair to help them to grow and to understand and have a balance. So what we are facing is ageism. And ageism is not only about the youngest looking to the oldest, but is also the oldest looking to the youngest. So I think that in retail, we have a lot of challenge with all this evolution in terms of digitalization and in terms of brick and mortar. I agree fully with Flavio when we went to the NRF 2003, 2004, the brick and mortar stores were dead and will not come back anymore. And today we see that we are visceral. We need visceral emotions. And this means go to the store, talk to people, touch the product, try the product. And of course, we also like something like everything that was invented from the human being is something that will provide us less effort. So every invention that we made is to make our lives easier. Sometimes is not the true, but is what was made. So of course we love the question of being digitalized. So when you mention the CEO of Microsoft during the pandemic, I heard in Brazil, Flavio probably heard the same thing, that many companies said, I made 5 years digital transformation in 5 months. It's not true. If you haven't begun, you didn't. So you only did it if you were already working on it. So it's fundamental, the digitalization, and it's important to understand the borderless of the connection. This is cybersecurity as well. So it's another issue when you start connecting every app, everything to API, etc., to your business. So it becomes more risky, and you need to take attention. So I would say that boards today need to look to 3 major things: talents, and in talent we are talking about diversity. I am ashamed, Olivia, that you are the only woman in this talk here, but thank you, you are here. So diversity, we are talking about innovation, and we are talking about succession. Then the other thing is the environment. We are talking about climate change that will touch everyone, every company in this world. So this is a very important risk problem. We are talking about the species, life on Earth, and then we are talking about digitalization or IT. We need to talk about cybersecurity, data protection, and of course, the big fashion of the moment, AI. But I will say, and I think Brian mentioned this, I will tell you that in Brazil, we are living a strong AI washing. Because when retail said, and there's a research that came out last week, saying 75% of the Brazilian retailer companies say they are working with AI. Sorry, probably only if they use ways to go to the office. This is working with AI, but not more than that. So we need to learn and to practice and to implement and to transform people's life in a better way, in a better expansion, creating value. So my question to you, Brian, is what is the role of the new CEO in the retail business with this challenge of guaranteeing, because Flavio talk about the Chinese cross-border e-commerce platforms, but in Brazil, and probably in England you have this, but in Brazil we are facing an incredible problem with the bets, with betting, with all the digital bets, and this is creating a new competitor for the retail business. So what you think it is the new role of C-level or CEO to balance all this and especially guarantee that his business will long last?
Okay, let me give it a kind of quick go, Hugo. Look, I think in this digitally enabled world that we live in today, what is needed in business is well-led smart teams and not people working on their own. And that's a bit of a generalization. I think the leader's job is to build and nurture great teams. I heard a great quote from a guy called Ed Catmull, who was the chief executive of Pixar when Disney took them over. And he said, give a good idea to a mediocre team and they will screw it up. Give a mediocre idea to a great team and they will either fix it or come up with something better. If you get the team right, the chances are they'll get the ideas right. And, you know, a guy called Jim Collins wrote a book called Good to Great, and he talked about getting the right people on the bus as well. So I think there's a huge amount of the leader's job is building and nurturing and getting that team together. And remember, leading and managing, they're related, but they're different. Leaders tend to be more strategic. They look further ahead. They inspire people. They're engaging, they're aligning, they're influencing. You also need managers who are more about executing efficiently and planning and organizing, but they're complementary. The manager is a steward who makes the organization work better. The leader changes the organization and moves it to a very different place. And I think I observed the change in tech and digital leadership when the PC came along, because before then, you know, cycle times and response times were much slower. And that forced the pace of change. So businesses had to make faster, better decisions. And the modern digital companies that I've grown up with, you know, they've got speed, they've got aggression, they've got acquisitiveness. I mean, Cisco used to buy companies for the engineers, not for the IP or the tech necessarily. And, you know, these businesses, they've got higher attrition because new hires constantly bring fresh ideas and attitudes, and that's that Darwinian thing again. So, as I said earlier, an innovation culture is a learning culture. It's about trial and error. It's about data-driven decisions. And I think you talked about Gen Z and Alpha and everyone now. You know, leadership in the modern era has become a democracy. It's not a dictatorship. You can't tell people what to do. You've got to kind of sell them on it. People have got to want to follow you or they will vote with their feet. And I think that is a fundamental. And I think the modern digital leaders today have got that and they're comfortable operating at pace, using data. It's a very collegiate style of leadership. It's non-hierarchical. It is that experimenting and making quick decisions. So I think leadership has changed quite a bit. And I think the characteristics I've talked about will be the characteristics of successful companies.
Just an observation. From the 11 companies that were in the Good to Great book of Jim Collins, 2 bankrupted. And they bankrupted during the financial crisis for a lack of leadership.
Yeah.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Hugo. And this is, I think, a great segue now for Olivia to come in, because I think one of the first things that Brian said is that many of the companies that used to be listed on the Fortune 500 list in the 70s or 60s, 70s, I mean, they're lasting not as long as they used to, right? So Olivia, you as an operator first, in my opinion, and then an investor, What would you like to ask Brian, and what are some of the observations that you would have in terms of, yeah, how to future-proof your existence as a as a player today?
Yeah, for sure. You set me up nicely for that one. I think that point about corporate longevity is incredibly powerful and strong, and something that needs to be thought about, I believe, every day. With what's happening in AI, we are going to have the opportunity to have very small teams building huge value companies. And with that, there's this transformation, right? You talked about the Department of Defense and how slowly it moves, and how, I think you can probably use that to describe a lot of other large corporate companies or government. And as an American who lives mostly in Paris, I noticed this massive difference between the culture of fear and failure versus experimentation and adaptability. And I think I wanted to really dig into that piece. As a former Amazonian, I saw how focused we were first on customers, but then also on flexibility to make the right decisions for the business. And I think at Amazon, more than any other company I've worked at, if you could prove the point that your job was not needed or that a department wasn't needed, you actually had that freedom, and you were championed to go ahead and say, hey, I'm extraneous. I'm not needed. Let's get rid of my job. And the belief was you would then go find a better job somewhere else. There's a great article called Giving Away Your Legos, Rules for Scaling. And it's very much that concept of, as you build a business, you're like a little 2-year-old who has your pile of Legos. You absolutely love them. You hold on to them tight because you're really good at building with those Legos. But to actually move forward and advance, you have to give those Legos away, and you have to move on to the bigger, better pile of building toys. So my question for you is, how do you bridge that gap between a sort of fear-based culture or even an adaptable culture that has these sort of strong frameworks of right and wrong versus what needs to happen, which is, I believe, a bunch of people saying, hey, my job's not needed. Let me replace it with AI and have the confidence that I'm going to go find something else.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough one, Olivia, and I think part of it is, it is that cultural thing between America and the rest of the world, almost, because America is the place that takes those risks. I loved, my time at Amazon, and I remember some of the things that you talked about there. I mean, Jeff used to talk about 2 pizza teams. If you had a problem to crack, you couldn't have a team on it larger than you could feed with 2 pizzas, and so it got people thinking about, 10's probably a big number for a team. A sign of success in Amazon was that you were given a smaller team for your next job. The conventional way of thinking is you progress through an organization by having more and more responsibility, more and more people. In Amazon, you get less people because you'd proved that you could scale a team, you could make it bigger, and then you could probably split the atom by actually creating 2 businesses, and you end up the smaller one. And that was the way it was. I think what I do see around me is that with the arrival of a lot of the big American techs in Europe, when you've got, Google and people and Amazon headquartered, and they've got operations in many countries, you do start to see a little bit of, transmission of culture and operating behaviors. People move back and forward, not at the pace that it's going to transform things overnight. But I also do think that investors and private equity and people like that have got a role to play here as well. When I think back to my time in Kinnevik, I think Kinnevik was a pretty far-sighted company, made some big bets. It did back people. And certainly we had on the board, not American people, but people who'd worked for American companies, people who'd been entrepreneurs, people who'd been prepared to take risks. And I think it is about that kind of risk-taking thing as much as anything else. So I do think, I think we all know that changing a culture in a company can take a long, long time. Changing a culture in a business society will take even longer. But I think we just got to keep doing it. We've got to keep forcing it, because the exemplars of, success and good behavior are the ones that run their organizations that way.
Got it. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. And what do you think the timeline is going to be for this transformation for AI first companies? I was talking to someone the other day who said they reckon in the next 1 to 2 years, you're going to have a multi $100 million company with, less than 10 employees. Do you reckon that timeline is feasible, or does that feel aggressive?
I think it's back to the point I made earlier. I think the timeline feels aggressive, and actually, I do believe when you think about China and how long term they think about things, they think in terms of 100 years. You look at how long it took them to take back Hong Kong. They waited to the 100th anniversary of the treaty, etc. So I just think that it's not so much when it happens. It will certainly happen. I think when it does happen, the impact, as we said earlier, will be even more profound. So I think there will be many, many, many of these companies created by small teams using AI, but I don't think they're going to come along in the next year or two. I think, it's probably more of a midterm thing, but I think it's really important that everyone in any business, in any walk of life, is not putting off thinking about and worrying about AI, until it's 3 or 4 years down the track, or till we've seen some companies actually do that. I think that it's really important to be experimenting today, to be playing today. There are lots of open source, publicly available large language models that you can take and you can then mix with your own data. And so I think that there are, even small companies today can start to be playing with this. I think, entrepreneurs will be starting to think about it as well. But I've loved working with entrepreneurs. They are driven, they've got courage. They see a problem in the market. They see a gap in the market, and then there's a market in that gap. How much time they are thinking about AI today, I don't know. But there is no doubt that somebody who's thinking 3, 4 years ahead has said, I'm going to build a new sort of company. I can't afford to hire 50 people. I'm going to use the latest, greatest tech. And myself and a Jeff Bezos 2 pizza team will create the next Google or something.
Thank you. So I will move now to, so thank you all. What we're going to do now, we have a few questions from our audience and members who could not join the panel here with you guys. So the first question coming in is from Dalia. Dalia is based in Egypt. Is a very active member in our community. She used to lead global insights for Mondelez for emerging markets. So her question is about e-commerce is literally a lifestyle now, especially younger age groups. How far do you think this has pushed consumerism? Is there an ethical angle to it? In reflection, technology is a bit stretched to possibly not acceptable. Thoughts? Can you see the question, Brian?
Yeah, I can see it. Yeah. Well, let me have a quick go. Look, I think that e-commerce and more than e-commerce, social media has really pushed consumerism without a doubt. And it's a few years since I was chairing ASOS, but even then, if you think about a young customer, the average ASOS customer is probably 16 to 22, very aware, very concerned about the purpose of the company, what you stood for. And giving you lots of strong messages about ethical sourcing, about work practices in Pakistan and places, getting very concerned about animal testing, just leather's become a no-no. So the voice of the consumer, especially the young social media savvy consumer, is absolutely getting heard there. The one thing I would say is that although consumers want products to be sustainable and come from better sources, I'm not sure how much they're prepared to pay for that. So I think what they want is all of those things for the same price as the less sensitive product. But that will catch up. So yes, I do think that e-commerce and social media are driving consumerism, and I think that's a good thing. I think companies really need to understand pretty quickly what the customers think and what the customers worry about. Because if you don't understand that and you don't respond to it, you probably won't survive.
Thank you. The next question is from Paulo. Paulo is the head of international expansion for Câmara, which is a Brazilian digital transformation tech company expanding into Europe. And he's asking you about some of the companies that you work for needed to transform. I like to transform IBM, Xerox, Dell. I'd like to hear your thoughts on those different cultures, up and downsides, and how they impacted your journey as a leader. I believe he's talking about working across different cultures. And this is very interesting because we have a very international group here who's been operating in, European cultures, American cultures. And so, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Let me have a go. I'm not sure if I fully understand the question, but certainly I've been involved in a few cultural transitions, transformations. When I look back to IBM, for instance, it's really, really hard to transform a company from the inside because those who've never been anywhere else don't know what good looks like outside. And one of IBM's strengths and one of its weaknesses is that people stayed there forever. I left after 10 years and people thought I was being risky and foolhardy. Why on earth would you leave this great, safe company? And what transformed IBM? It was bringing in Lou Gerster from the outside. And Lou Gerster came in from the outside, a smart business person who'd never made or sold or used a computer in his life. But he looked at the way that IBM worked. He looked at the lack of focus on the customers. He looked at the kind of the complacency, and he turned the company upside down. And he turned it into a services-based company. Not that they threw out the great tech and the great hardware, but that they became much more customer-focused, much more advisory, much more understanding markets. And he brought about that transition. So I do think to transform a company, it becomes very, very hard to do it if all of the people inside the company have all lived the same siloed experience over the past 10 years. So you need to bring in fresh blood and fresh talent and fresh ideas to help you do that.
Mm-hmm. Great. Then we have another question here from Hawan. Hawan is Brazilian based in the US. He runs an e-com agency. And Brian, thank you for your time and for sharing these great experiences. Based on your extensive background, what was the most common key factor you found that created successful companies you've been involved with?
Howard, thank you. A very good question. Again, I'd say a couple of things, and they are related. I think company culture is really, really important. And I think at places like Amazon, people know what the culture is. And I think related to that, the whole leadership ethos, the leadership behavior is important too. In IBM, in Amazon, we actually codified, leadership principles. There were, I think, 9 or 10 of them. And it told you what are the characteristics of Amazon leaders. And you either had to have demonstrated that you knew what those behaviors were before you joined, or we had to believe that we could train you in some of these. Some of them are not trainable. But, every leader in Amazon, as part of the coaching, they understood these principles and they worked with their team to make sure that they understood them too. And I think that's one of the great legacies that Jeff Bezos created, because when he stepped back, as he has done over the past 5 years, the team that he left running the business, had the same values as he did about what was good and what was right in the world. So I think you can't really, I think you need to have a strong culture, a strong purpose, and a leadership that gets it together for that to happen. And it doesn't mean that the leadership, agrees with itself, all the time. I mean, one of the leadership behaviors was have backbone, disagree and commit. So basically, you can disagree. You can say to Jeff, well, actually, no, I don't think that form factor for Kindle is the right thing to do. But when the team makes a decision and gets behind it, you all get behind it. I'm sure many of you have been in a company where some decision's been made and you've been part of that, and you go outside and you meant to brief it out to your teams. And you know that there were some people briefing it saying, oh, these idiots have made the wrong decision. This is what we're going to do. You must wholeheartedly get behind the leadership decision and radiate it out to the team. So I think culture and leadership behavior are really, building blocks for organizational success.
Thank you for that. Now we have a question from Rafael Barini, who's Brazilian based in Switzerland. He was leading the digital transformation of RBI, which is a very large restaurant chain. He asks, with the rapid rise of social commerce and live shopping, particularly in Asia, do you think Western markets will adopt these trends at the same scale? And how should companies prepare for this shift?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't have a very in detailed answer. I mean, what I would say, and we're seeing it when we talked about Shein and China and the Chinese marketplace companies and their penetration of Western economies. You know, 3, 4, 5 years ago, I don't think people thought they could do that. I think there's always been a little bit of arrogance in, I would say, in America and in Britain and in much of Europe and perhaps in parts of South America too, where it's always, you know, our way is better. I think we've always looked down on a lot of the Asian stroke Chinese methods, ways of working, ways of doing business. You know, we always thought they were kind of cheap and cheerful products. And now I think we're realizing that it's not as simple as that. And they are pushing on. And if you give customers products that they want in the way that they want them at a price that they're prepared to pay, people have got no problems at all buying directly from Chinese companies. And it's overt, they know the Chinese companies, but they're still happy to do it because they now believe that there's a quality and a value there. So I don't know how long it will take, but I do think that if Western companies and Western economies aren't prepared to learn from Asia and from China, I think there's a few shocks coming for them.
Perfect. Thank you, Brian. So our final question from Dominic Telaro. He's also a very active member based in Canada. He used to lead professional services at Elastic Path and just had a new challenge. So he's a big fan of elevator pitches. If you were asked to summarize 3 key points that you follow in terms of building a great business, what would they be?
Very good. Well, that's an elevator question. I've got about 6 seconds to try and come up with the answer. I mean, I would say, I mean, 2 or 3 things maybe. First of all, to a budding entrepreneur, what's the problem you're trying to fix? Right? There's got to be a need for what it is you're going to create. So what's the problem you're trying to fix? And then when you do that, you create that vision. I think you need to have massive stamina and drive. You know, there'll be lots of people trying to put you off. You can't do it. It's not affordable. You know, you need the courage of your conviction. You need that energy, and you've got to be prepared to stick with it. And then thirdly, I'd say you are not the smartest person on the planet. So surround yourself with great people, a great team, people who know more of different things than you. You don't need a huge army. You could do it with 2 or 3 people. So those would perhaps be the 3 things that I would say is the as I can hear the beat of the elevator as it hits the ground floor.
Fantastic. So with that said, I really would like to thank you all for joining this incredible session. So Brian, I told you this, I wrote you on Instagram. That's how we caught up. And I said that the interview we did a few years ago transformed my life, which is true. That interview was instrumental for, you know, all of this evolution and what Evolve is becoming, and my belief in content and getting people together. I believe the world needs diversity. I believe the world needs people getting together. I believe we are living in a very polarized world. And so my goal with Evolve is to get people together, to exchange ideas and to learn. You know, like, I think there's nothing, being an international in Denmark, for 11 years, I see so much value in ideas, you know, exchanging ideas and having different people in a room, and then connecting people, of course. So Brian, I really appreciate this. Thank you for your time. Olivia, Hugo, Adam, Flavio, I'm a fan. You all know it. So thank you all. And I'll see you soon. And make sure you guys are present on our WhatsApp group. Brian, I made the invite as well, so you're very welcome to join our club. There's no nonsense there. And that's it. All right.
Thank you very much, Carlos. Thanks to everyone. Thanks to our colleagues for taking part in the panel.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.